Channel open. Welcome back to WeeklyTrek, a proud member of the Tricorder Transmissions Podcast Network. I am your host, Alex Perry.
What's today's date? The date.
Today's show was recorded on March 27th, 2020, and is current through the Star Trek Picard season finale, Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2, so beware of spoilers. All right, let's get into the show.
Good day, Voyager, and welcome to A Briefing with Neelix. It's a catchy title, isn't it?
WeeklyTrek is a 30-minute news show covering the biggest stories from the Star Trek franchise. We are in a new golden age of Star Trek. There are 5 television shows at some point in production, possibly more on the way, and enough merchandise to fill the Bajoran wormhole. So stick with me, and I'll help you sort the real facts from a lot of the Dominion propaganda that you'll find online. But I can't do this alone, and my guest this week is returning guest Geoff Owen. Geoff, welcome back to WeeklyTrek.
Thanks very much, Alex. Glad to be back.
All right, Geoff, you know the drill. I want to know something that's got you feeling good about Star Trek at the moment. What's got you moving at Warp 10?
I'm going to be really obvious, sorry, Alex, but that finale, Picard Season 1, Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2, was that episode going for the feels or what?
It sure was.
The scene that we've got with Data and Picard in that simulation, I think that was the scene that we'd been waiting for since Nemesis. And it was such a nice scene to have.
Yeah, it definitely did provide closure on that relationship much more, I think, than Star Trek Nemesis had done. The death of Data was, I think, rather poorly handled in that movie. And even though you get that really nice scene at the end where the crew is all collected around toasting his memory, that's really all you get. And you don't really get Data's perspective on having passed away, or you don't really get a sort of good moment for Data with many of the characters before he dies. And while you might say, you know, that is probably true to life and that we, in many cases, don't get the opportunity to choose when that happens. From a fictional perspective, it was still really nice to have gotten that closure on both the character and on the relationships in a way that we were really robbed of in 2003. So yeah, I'm 100% with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know it's part of the news stories that we'll be talking about today as well. But I have to say as well that going back to Nemesis, obviously you had the ending scene. And I think there was obviously a big intention for Data to come back, because obviously you had B4 whistling at the end of the film, obviously hinting that Data's not dead. And I think that's probably why they didn't have such a big ending scene for him in Nemesis. But now he's got now he's had the ending that we've been waiting for. So I was glad to see it. And yeah, that was what got me moving at Warp 10. And dare I say it, there might have been a tear or two.
Or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20 in my case.
I'm blaming the dust in the room at the time. I don't know about you, Alex.
For me, I think it was the acting, of course, was incredible. The scene itself was incredible.
Yeah.
The cover of Blue Sky sung by Issa Briones, who plays
wasn't that
Soji.
beautiful?
Amazing. They've made it available for purchase on Amazon, and I've listened to it a number of times since yesterday, and every time it makes me tear up. It is really, really good.
I hadn't seen that it was available to buy, but I might just have to go straight over to Amazon once we finish today.
Yeah, they put it up yesterday, I think, in a way of trying to cash in on the season finale. Well, the thing that I'm feeling good about is also from this week's Star Trek Picard Season 1 finale, Et in Arcadia Ego Part 2. But it's a moment we haven't talked about yet. We've talked about the sort of heavy, serious character moments. I want to talk about my fist pump favorite moment of the episode, and that is the appearance of Captain William T. Riker.
Yes.
Aboard USS Zhang He. Picard's done a really bad job of spoiling its big character reveals in episodes by including the actor's name in the opening credits.
Yeah, I saw that.
But having predicted last week that I thought there was going to be a surprise, I made a special point to not pay attention to the opening credits this week, just in case they had made that mistake again, which they had. And so I had no idea that Frakes was going to be in the episode. And so when the Starfleet Task Force appears and Riker appears on screen, I was so thrilled, so excited. It was so much fun, and Frakes absolutely rocked it. I mean, he rocked it 3 weeks ago in Nepenthe, playing the older Father Riker, but to see him back in Starfleet Riker mode with the lean in the chair and the mannerisms and just the commanding presence, wearing the 2399 Starfleet uniform in command red with the captain's pips. Just a really fabulous, incredible moment. Probably one of my favorite of the season so far.
I totally agree with you. I know Trek Ranks have just released an episode about comfort food episodes, and I would have put Nepenthe down there as one of those episodes. However, after this week's new episode, I have to say that I think Riker was 80% Riker in Nepenthe, and he went full Riker in this episode.
The full Riker, yes, we did get the full Riker in this episode, and I loved just every single second of it. I mean, I have really enjoyed all of the other characters that we have seen having, lived these full, rich, additional lives that go beyond the last time that we saw them, either in Nemesis or at the end of Voyager. However, it was really nice for just a moment to get one of those characters back doing the kind of things that we grew to know them for and grew to love them for. Mm-hmm. And as much as I have relished every moment with Jean-Luc Picard this season, they have, and we'll get into talking about this in the news stories, been very intentionally creating this character who was quite different from the Jean-Luc Picard of Star Trek Nemesis. And so to get a Captain Riker back in the command chair, who, yes, has also gone through a lot, has seen his fair share of tragedy, but who could switch it back on again and who could sort of fall back into the old Riker persona. Just a joy to see.
Yeah, it was a pleasure to see him back in the captain's chair, back on the bridge of a starship.
Exactly. The bridge of the USS Discovery, no less, since it turns out the scene was filmed in Toronto on the Discovery bridge set with a bit of redressing.
I thought it looked a little familiar.
It sure did. All right. Well, with that, let's turn to the week's top stories.
There's a war going on, and I'm a reporter.
So our first story this week is an interview between Patrick Stewart and The Hollywood Reporter, which was published on the same day as the season finale of Star Trek Picard. So yes, it does talk about the perhaps biggest, most surprising event of the end of Star Trek Picard Season 1, which is the death and the resurrection of Jean-Luc Picard as a synthetic life form. So Patrick was asked about the way that the season ended, and he said, I only learned of Picard's death way into shooting the first season, and that because that final episode wasn't written yet, I didn't know that it was part of the storyline. But it seems to be one that he has embraced with gusto, and I think is interested and excited about where things go. This was not in the Hollywood Reporter interview, but in the official Picard podcast this week, he talked a little bit about his hopes for the character for season 2. And I think, there will be some kind of exploration of this idea of him in many ways, as I think Akiva Goldsman put it, walk the walk in terms of the statements that the show was trying to make about synthetic life being on par with organic life. Now Picard sort of straddles that line between the two. So Patrick talked a bit about how the scenes between Picard and Data were definitely for him, quote, the highlight of the season, and that also that was a scene that the writers were trying to be really careful to get right, and so they were working on it right up until the evening before they shot it. He said, I was looking forward to shooting it so very much because I adore working with Brent, but the content of this scene was so serious and so important to the characters, and the affection and mutual respect was so clear and so strong. Picard knew that this would probably be the last time he was ever with Data, and we had to address that. The guilt Picard felt over Data's loss at the beginning of the season, that the two characters never had a proper goodbye or resolution in Nemesis. We took almost the entire day, as I recall, to shoot the scene, but it was a very, very intense experience, and certainly one that has paid off on the screen. I mean, I think, reactions to Picard season 1 overall have been relatively good, but certainly mixed. I do not give it a 100% thumbs up. There were certainly things about the season that didn't work for me. Overall, though, I really enjoyed it. And I think that scene is going to come out as being one of the powerhouse scenes for the series, and certainly is up there in terms of some of the best scenes from the franchise as a whole. He also talked about how following that scene, he worked out a deal with the production to purchase the chair he had been sitting in. I guess he liked it very much, and now that's at his home in England. And lastly, he's talked a little bit about how much fun it was to film the whole season. And when asked to name a favorite moment, he talked about how during the filming of Nepenthe, which was the episode with Riker and Troy, so Jonathan Frakes, Marina Sirtis, and Sir Patrick were all on set together. They were joined for the day and visited by LeVar Burton, who played Geordie LaForge, and Michael Dorn, who had played Worf. And so it was sort of a mini TNG cast reunion on the set of Star Trek Picard. Jeff, what did you think about this interview with Sir Patrick Stewart?
It was absolutely fascinating. I was quite surprised, to be honest, that he didn't know that Picard was going to be killed by the end of the season. And if you remember back in my first appearance on WeeklyTrek, my forecast was that I thought Picard was going to die, and I thought, I hope I'm wrong, but it proved to be right, but not in the way I was expecting, to be perfectly honest. Yes, it was very interesting to see that he didn't know that he was going to be killed off. I do love his description of the scene with Data, and I do find it quite touching that he bought the chair as well. And according to the article, it's the only piece of memorabilia apart from his comm badge and a uniform he got much later on that he actually owns from Star Trek. And seeing the original photo that came through with LeVar Burton and Michael Dorn, that was another reason why I thought that we might have seen Geordie show up as your legacy character at the end of the first season of Picard. I think we'll get to see them at some point in the future, but there must have been quite a nice surprise for them, for those guests to turn up during the filming.
It seems like they do want to find opportunities for each of the TNG cast members to appear at some point. But yes, now we've finished Star Trek Picard Season 1, that at this point is just Riker, Troy, and Data. We will have to look to Season 2 and 3 to get Geordie, Worf, and Beverly Crusher in through the door, in addition to Guinan, who we know will be a part of the second season of Star Trek Picard. And it's exciting. I mean, I think, the season ended in such a way where there really is no hint about what Season 2 will be about. Not like the end of Star Trek Discovery Season 1, where the Enterprise shows up, and so that the second season is going to kick off with what's going on with the Enterprise, why have they arrived. The first season very much was a complete story. I mean, if they didn't make any more seasons, it would kind of be okay, because it's not like there's too much story that they left unresolved. That's not to say that, seasons 2 and 3, there's no story to tell. There's a huge amount of sort of different directions that they could go in with it. It's just that those possibilities are quite limitless at this point, and so sort of tough to see where things will head. And it's certainly very exciting that Sir Patrick Stewart is so happy with the end result.
Yeah, exactly. And you were saying as well about the whole scope of where the second season could go, because we didn't have a teaser at the end. And you mentioned about Discovery Season 1. Obviously, we had something similar at the end of Discovery Season 2. And it seems to be the way of serialized television as well, because we've had it at the end of seasons of Lost in Space. We've had it at the end of seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., of various other TV programs. There's a hint of what's to come in the next season, and we didn't get it. So it is an absolutely open book for Season 2.
Well, we will transition from an interview in The Hollywood Reporter with Star Trek Picard's oldest cast member to an interview in The Hollywood Reporter with Star Trek Picard's youngest cast member. This time it's Evan Evagora doing an interview about his character Elnor. This interview was published a couple of days before the season finale, so it doesn't talk too much about the finale itself. It's more about Evan Evagora's character Elnor, about the interactions that he had with the cast and crew members. And Evan does grapple with this question of, which has been sort of bandied about online, of, is Elnor a Romulan space elf? I mean, certainly from his appearance, he does have a sort of Tolkien-esque quality to him. And I think the writers sort of did that intentionally. Michael Chabon has sort of pointed towards Elnor as being a fun sort of little in-joke, Elnor being Star Trek in in Tolkien's Elvish language. Evan sort of pushed back on the idea that Elnor is a space Legolas. He said, we, or at least I, had some thoughts like, is my character maybe a little too close to what some fans have seen in other things in other franchises like The Lord of the Rings? But in talking with Michael Chabon and with Alex Kurtzman and the other great writers, I quickly realized we are giving audiences something similar but different, this almost moody teenager, something that feels new to Star Trek for sure. And I think that's definitely true. I mean, in terms of the character's arc over the season, while, he was this great swordsman and was engaged in these great fights, the character's arc was more about how he was basically just a kid who finds himself in this situation where the stakes are much higher than anything he's had to grapple with before. And how does he sort of deal with that? And what's his relationship with Picard, this father figure who had abandoned him almost a decade prior? And speaking of Picard, he talked a bit about his first meeting with Sir Patrick Stewart. He says, I was terrified. It was like the worst first meeting ever. On my first day of filming, I felt so very nervous. And Patrick, he just took me aside because he could tell. But it's not like he told me a story about being nervous or anything like that. He just helped me feel at ease and more comfortable just by talking to me. And then went on to talk about Patrick's role in the ensemble as the leader of the cast. He said he really loves being in the ensemble, and not just the cast, but the entire crew. We're all equals, and he sets that tone every day. Geoff, were you a fan of Elnor's character?
Absolutely, I was a fan of it. And from the first few moments we saw him, I didn't expect him to be the comedy relief in so many episodes as well. But yeah, absolutely. I'm not personally a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, so I'd seen the comparisons between him and I think Elrond from Lord of the Rings, particularly with his very similar name as well. But from what I understand, he's a totally different character. As he said, he's moody. He's a killer, but he's a moody teenager as well. But the one thing I noticed as well, that when he's talking about his first day of filming and his nerves, did it remind you of how Will Wheaton used to say that Patrick Stewart made him feel in those early days of The Next Generation as well?
For sure.
And it just seems like Patrick is like that. He's very, very supportive of young up-and-coming actors.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really enjoyed Elnor as a character. I think they did do a very good job of focusing in on that sort of kid-like quality and playing up the actor's youth to give him that sort of comedic element also. There are a number of situations in which I don't want to quite say that Elnor was the kind of data of the group, but in terms of not understanding certain social interactions or needing a bit of extra help, they did manage to mine that for some good comedy in some of these episodes. And I personally think the character was great, and for me, very much leaned away from the sort of space elf thing. And I am really interested in seeing a lot more of him in the second and third seasons.
Can I just say as well that I was extremely disappointed that he didn't get to meet Spock too.
Yes, I think many of us are disappointed about that. I guess Michael Chabon was asked about it on Instagram. He said that they did not shoot a scene in which Elnor had met Spock 2, but that he did seem to recall that at one point there had been a scene in the script that would have done that, but at some point it got cut out before the final script was produced, which is a crying shame.
Exactly, considering that he remembered talking about Data's orange cat. So I really would like to see that scene at some point in season 2. Come on, Mr. Kurtzman, you know what to Mr. Chabon, you know what to do.
All right, well, we will leave it there for Star Trek Picard. I'm sure there will be plenty more for us to talk about in regards to Picard over the weeks ahead as we start learning more about the season 1 finale and starting to look ahead to season 2. But the big question on everybody's mind, of course, is what's next up on the agenda for the Star Trek franchise. And thanks to a very short intro teaser that was right at the start of the Star Trek Picard season finale, I think we have a pretty good idea that it's going to be Star Trek Discovery Season 3. So we did not get a premiere date for the season. It was only listed as coming soon, but there was just a very short, and by very short, I mean about 10-second teaser for Star Trek Discovery Season 3 that was included right at the start of the season finale for Picard. It shows actually a series of images that we have seen online that was circulating after CBS had done some audience tests with their CBS All Access Insider mailing list of promo art for Star Trek Discovery Season 3. It's that image, you may have seen it online, of Michael Burnham holding up a tattered flag of the Federation. In this case, the flag of the Federation that we've seen in the teaser trailer for Star Trek Discovery that was released at New York Comic-Con in October of last year, and was also on display on the Star Trek cruise just a few weeks ago. No more information yet about when we will get to see Star Trek Discovery Season 3, but the inclusion of this little teaser does make me think that next up on deck for us will be Discovery and not Lower Decks, as some have speculated. Geoff, are you looking forward to Season 3 of Star Trek Discovery?
I am absolutely looking forward to Star Trek Discovery Season 3. The teaser that they got on CBS Access obviously wasn't shown at the start of the airing on Prime, because they're not going to advertise something on a competitor's channel. But the trailer, very, very brief, but yeah, it does tease you to what's coming up in the season, particularly with the flag being shown again.
I think it certainly does indicate that the theme of Star Trek Discovery Season 3 is going to be one of trying to, quote unquote, restore some semblance of the Federation to this far future that maybe has lost it. I mean, it seems like it does still exist in some form, but the way, the idea of holding up the flag being a bit tatty, Michael Burnham being the one to hold it up, that sort of does tell me, I think, quite a bit about what the overarching theme of the season will be, which is one of a crew from the 22nd century around this sort of high period for the United Federation of Planets, being involved in sort of reminding these people a millennium forward in time about why it matters, and about why it was a good thing, and about why the principles of the Federation deserve to be brought back to that time period, which I think could be a very interesting storyline. It's certainly one that various people have tried to do in Star Trek, but never gotten really very far in doing so. There were several aborted pitches for either movies or TV shows after the cancellation of Enterprise and before J.J. Abrams came in to take over the franchise in 2007. That led towards the 2009 Star Trek movie, in which there was one for an animated show, and then I think there was also a live action proposal, which was sort of a let's go way into the future and have the Federation not be around anymore, and sort of have the show be about putting it back together. And it does seem like that is a compelling idea, and it's one that the current production team seem to really want to explore with Discovery. And I think, that could be super interesting.
I totally agree as well. I know there's been some talk on some of the more toxic side of fandom about how it compares to the other Gene Roddenberry series, Andromeda. And to be fair, it's not totally dissimilar to the idea of that series, someone coming back to rebuild their version of the Federation. But yeah, we know they're going to do it much, much better on Discovery than they did on Andromeda. And I quite like that program.
Yeah, I mean, it is perhaps not the most original of sort of story concepts or ideas, but that doesn't mean that it won't be executed in a way that is interesting and compelling and very, very watchable.
And I'm sure Andromeda wouldn't have been the first series that did that as well.
Gene was a great man, but he was also, not super original in a lot of the ideas that he put forward, particularly many of the story concepts he advanced later in his life, of which Andromeda was one of them.
And after all, Star Trek was Wagon Train to the Stars.
Exactly. And look, I mean, I think you can point back to it and say, it is a very Roddenberryan idea, because it's very similar to a story idea that he came up with for a different show after the cancellation of Star Trek. So I think, we will obviously learn a lot more about Star Trek Discovery Season 3 over the weeks and maybe months ahead. I think I had speculated in previous episodes that Discovery would premiere fairly close to the end of Star Trek Picard. I think because we're now at the end of Star Trek Picard Season 1 and don't know the date, it might be a bit longer than I had originally expected, but it does seem like it's next up on deck and something's coming soon.
And not only that, with obviously post-production work being slowed down as revealed by Wilson Cruz and Anthony Rapp because of the post-production team having to work largely from home because obviously of the pandemic.
Right, exactly. So, that will throw things up in the air and we'll just have to see where they land. Well, our last story this week is about the fallout of the coronavirus pandemic that is sweeping the globe right now, and that is that Destination Star Trek Germany, which was the first of the big Star Trek-only conventions this year, following the Star Trek cruise that managed to get in just before cases in the US started to pick up to a level where I think you probably would have preferred to avoid cruise ships. Destination Star Trek Germany is being postponed. The actually quite problem-plagued convention had originally been scheduled for May the 8th earlier this year due to entirely nothing to do with coronavirus. They had to move the convention a week earlier to May 1st. But now, because of the pandemic and because of many of the restrictions in Germany around social gatherings that are expected to last well into April and maybe into May, the convention organizers have made the decision to postpone the convention from May to October. It will now take place October 9th to the 11th, 2020. Same place, same location. And if you are a Destination Star Trek Germany ticket holder, your tickets for the May event will remain valid for October. You do not have to repurchase, though. If October does not work for you, I think there is a refund mechanism in place to allow you to get your money back because of the postponement of the convention. Geoff, you are located in Europe. Was Destination Star Trek Germany on your agenda for this year?
It wasn't on mine, but I know a few people who were planning on going, and as far as I know, they're still planning on going. The only thing that obviously concerns me is about hotel accommodation and flights. I know that's out of Destination Star Trek's hands, but I hope obviously that that sort of arrangement can also be put back to October.
Yeah, I know airline carriers here in the US have been very forgiving about allowing changes to tickets and giving flight credits for flights within this sort of next, 6 weeks to 2 months. So hopefully the same holds true for the European carriers as well, and letting people rebook their flights to October without a financial penalty. I mean, obviously, we're all kind of muddling our way through this current crisis to the best we can, but it is exciting that come the fall, European Star Trek fans will have actually a fair amount to look forward to with Destination Star Trek Germany in October and then Destination Star Trek London following fairly close on its heels in November.
Yeah, you've got the two Destination Star Trek events happening within the space of a couple of weeks. I mean, I don't think anybody's complaining about the fact that it's being put back. It makes absolute perfect sense at the moment with what's happening. Myself and my partner, we actually trade at Comic Cons here in the southwest of the UK. We've had a number of our Comic Cons put back. In fact, what was quite a full Comic-Con schedule for March, April, May. We haven't got anything now until at least maybe June. So, hopefully everything will get back up and running very soon, and this virus can obviously be sorted out with a vaccine or a cure, and hopefully we can start returning to normality as soon as we can.
Well, we will keep our fingers crossed, but in the meantime, there are 800 hours of Star Trek to occupy our time as we all wait indoors for the all clear to finally start to return to our everyday lives. Well, we've talked about the facts, and now let's speculate on what's going to happen in the future of Star Trek.
You make some very good points, Captain. But it's still all speculation and theory.
So each week, I and my guest give you a wish or a theory we're nurturing about Picard, Discovery, Lower Decks, any of the upcoming shows, new upcoming shows, merchandise, etc., etc. So Geoff, let's hear your theory or wish for this week.
Mine is quite straightforward, actually, with the post-production of Discovery, as previously mentioned, being taking place now at home. I kind of hope that we see Discovery fairly soon, because even though we've had 10 episodes of the fantastic Star Trek Picard, I am still looking forward to Discovery coming on the air. I'm looking forward to short treks. I'm looking forward to Section 31 and, dare I say it, Captain Pike at some point on our television screens. But I hope that we get Discovery on air sooner rather than later. But obviously, keep safe, everybody in Canada, and Western US.
Yeah, absolutely. It is always a bummer when we get to the end of new Star Trek and we don't have a clear idea of when the next thing will be premiering. I was really, really hoping that with the season finale of Picard, they would give us a date for Discovery Season 3 so that we could put that on our calendars and have something to look forward to. I mean, we know it's coming soon. It'd just be really nice to know exactly when that is, especially in these times when I, certainly over the last couple of weeks have been really enjoying Star Trek Picard just as a respite from everything that has been going on. And it will be a shame not to have that anymore. I'll have to find something else to pour my escapism into. So yeah, I'm with you. I really, really hope we find out when it's coming very soon and that date is not too far away and that it's not significantly impacted by the coronavirus. Though obviously, if it is, it's extremely understandable. Everybody's lives and jobs and professions have been quite turned upside down by what's going on right now.
Yeah.
So my wish for this week actually ties into what I'm feeling good about Star Trek. So I was feeling extra good about the appearance of Captain Will Riker in the Star Trek Picard season finale. And my wish is that I would love to see more of the Rikers. Nepenthe was my favorite episode of Star Trek Picard season 1. And seeing Captain Riker back in the captain's chair in the season finale only whet my appetite to see more from those two characters. Even though I am desperately looking forward to seeing Geordi, Worf, and Beverly as part of the future of Star Trek Picard, I would also love to see the Rikers revisited, not just because it was the best episode of the season to date, but also because I think the history that they've established for those characters since Nemesis to today is a really interesting one. And I would love to see more of Kestra Troy Riker. In fact, I would like to see her so much that I think we've got this animated kids show coming up. We've also potentially got a Starfleet Academy show that's being talked about. I would love to see a role for Kestra Troy Riker maybe in one of those shows, which would give us an opportunity to see more of her parents in the process. Geoff, what do you think about that?
That's a great idea. I hadn't even thought about the Nickelodeon series. Yeah, I think she's perfect for that. Seeing it from the young point of view. I know the plot was meant to be something along the lines of a group of kids find a starship, but there's no reason why you can't have characters like Kestra or even Thad if it's set in such a time as well, and see them interact with the kids in the Nickelodeon series.
Yeah, so I think there's lots of opportunities. They've created great characters. We don't just have to look back to the Berman era of Star Trek or the original series era of Star Trek for great characters to revisit. There are some great characters that have been created right here, right now that we would love to see again. And the Rikers being the legacy characters and their daughter Kestra being the character from modern day Trek are ones that I would really like to see more of. So give me more Rikers, and the more stare downs I can get from Captain Will Riker to aggrieved half Romulan, half Vulcan Zhat Vash generals, the better, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have a theory or a wish for Discovery Picard or the future of the franchise that you'd like to share? Tweet them to me at WeeklyTrek, and I might feature your theory in a future episode. Well, that's all the time we've got for this episode of Weekly Trek. Thank you so much to my guest, Geoff Owen, for joining me today. Geoff, how can people contact you if they want to continue the conversation?
There's two ways. As you're aware, I run a Twitter page called Today in Star Trek, which is coming up to 2 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much. I'm looking for a way to reinvigorate it going forward so people don't end up seeing the same stories year on year. And my normal Twitter profile is NCC_17 Formula One, where at the moment I'm trying to keep away the coronavirus blues by posting a league table and getting people to vote on Star Trek movies versus Star Wars movies and even Galaxy Quest.
I have submitted my votes for the most recent round, so I'm looking forward to seeing Star Trek trounce out Star Wars as is only proper.
Absolutely.
And you can find this show on Twitter at WeeklyTrek and me at Alexander T. Perry. And if you enjoy the show, please consider leaving us a 5-star review on your podcast player of choice. And please check out some of the other great shows on the Tricorder Transmissions. And if you like our shows, please also consider becoming a Patreon of Tricorder, which you can find at patreon.com/the Tricorder Transmissions. And lastly, if you're looking for Star Trek news on the internet, I hope you will turn to trekcore.com. Well, thank you, Geoff. Thank you to all of my listeners. And until next week, live long and prosper.